The question of today's video is a little bit silly because it sounds like this. How many nodes do you need inside of DaVinci Resolve in order to create a good-looking Hollywood-like cinematic image? And it sounds ridiculous because, well, if you need a node, just create it. It doesn't matter how many you have. If you need one, just create. But I got asked a question, why would you need to create a node in the first place? Why can't you do all of your corrections inside of just one node? And I'm going to answer that question today, and also we'll try to determine the optimal amount of nodes in your node editor. So let's open DaVinci Resolve and try to answer the first question. Why would you need to create a node besides this one? Why can't you just do all of your corrections inside of just this one node? And the first example is pretty easy. We're gonna grab color space transform and throw it in here. Color space transform is going to transform one color space into the other, and if you're trying to do some corrections inside of this node, you are doing those corrections before you're transforming your footage into this color space. In addition to that, it will be quite difficult to understand what the hell you're doing here, and it would be quite difficult to understand what kind of correction is doing what when you're using color space transform and corrections in one node. Do not do that. The second example is any effect. If you're gonna throw any effect on your node, this effect should exist separately from any correction that you want to do. But technically, DaVinci Resolve is not gonna stop you. If you want to do any type of corrections inside of this node, DaVinci Resolve is going to allow it, regardless the fact that this is quite wrong. So I'm going to give you an example of operation that you cannot really do without creating a second node. The first example is going to be something like this. We're going to do some adjustments to this image. Do not really pay any attention to the corrections themselves because I'm not trying to achieve a good looking image. I'm just trying to make an example. I made some corrections in here. Now, let's say that I want to qualify this skin, or I want to create a power window and do some additional corrections to this image. And if I try to do that within the same node, all of the corrections that I did before are going to be constricted by the selection or the power window that I just created. So I physically cannot create those two effects within one single node. The second example is something like, for example, a bleach bypass effect or some effect that requires a couple of nodes working in parallel. By the way, if you're interested in bleach bypass effect as a separate video, in a very detailed one, just let me know in the comments below. So if you want to create some effect, you're gonna need to use some nodes in parallel or in layer or something like that. So you cannot do that within just one node. Now let's move to something that is not necessary, but that is reasonable. If you're doing some operations within this one node, let's just do a bunch of them. And then you want to have a look at what is going to happen if you just didn't do this type of correction. Because when you're color grading, you constantly are going to press Ctrl D to see whether this thing that you are doing is making your image better or worse. If you created an additional node, it would be quite easy to do. You just disengage it, engage, and here you are not destroying anything. But if you're doing everything in one node, it would be quite difficult to do. For example, I want to see what is going on with my image without this particular effect. And because I'm doing everything in one node, I would have to reset everything, have a look at the image, decide whether it was a good decision or bad one, and then make the same correction once again, which would be quite difficult to achieve because, well, we are not robots. We cannot really do the same type of corrections over and over again precisely. So this is a really bad approach to color grading. So I hope that now we are all in agreement that you're gonna need to create some nodes in order to finish your project. But how many? Because as a beginner colorist, we stumble upon experienced colorists who are gonna have like 20 to 30 nodes in here. And I cannot even imagine what they are going, well, I can imagine, and I'm going to explain it to you at the end of the video, but let's say just that it's kind of difficult to imagine what they are doing within 30 nodes. When you create like 5 or 6 and you're done, your imagination is simply over. So how many nodes do you need? Well, you can separate those nodes by objective. Example, the first node is going to be dedicated to balance. I'm going to balance my image the best I can. Well, not in this example. In this example, I'm just rotating and turning everything, and anything just doesn't matter. And then I'm going to create an additional node because my objective changed. The second objective is to change like any particular color that I want. For example, the shade of blue, I want to change it to something like this. That's why I created an additional node. Second way to approach that would be create a node to any dedicated area. And another example, I'm going to do some corrections in here. And if I want to make a correction using curves, I'm going to create for that an additional node. And this way I know that my nodes are separated by different areas inside of color page of DaVinci Resolve. If I'm going to work within Color Warper, I'm going to create an additional node. And then I will know that this one is this area, that one is this area, and so on and so forth. Those two examples, they can achieve the same looking image, absolutely indistinguishable, with completely different number of nodes. So the number of nodes doesn't really matter how many you have. The only thing that matters is that you understand your own structure, you know how to use it, you know how to change it, you know how to find a certain correction and how to undo and redo that. And it is easy for you. It is an easy workflow that you follow. That is the only thing that matters. That's why I encourage you to not get discouraged by seeing like 30 to 40 nodes at somebody's node editor. By the way, I promised that I would explain why they have like 30 to 40 nodes. Because they are experienced colorists, they're able to pinpoint certain areas within the image that need tweaking, and they know it, and they know what they want from the image. Let me give you an example. This image would be for a mediocre colorist, a beginner colorist. We would do something to this image that we consider good looking and then leave it as it is. An experienced colorist would probably start tweaking colors separately. For example, he doesn't like this shade of blue, so he's going to go to blue and tweak it just a little bit to the color that he wants. And that is going to create an additional node, and so on and so forth. By the way, another reason why a person can have a big number of those nodes is that he or she uses a template. I have in here a template that I applied to this particular shot, but within this template, these nodes, they are empty. They are not used for anything. This is done in order for me to not create those every single time I stumble upon a difficult shot. They are reserved for me. I know what I'm going to use them for, I know what I need them for, and I leave them as they are just in here. And despite the fact that they are not doing anything, the number of nodes is quite big, simply because I reserve those nodes for any type of operation that I might do later on. So that's why a person can have many nodes in here. So I hope it is now easier to understand why people have many nodes in here, and I hope now you're not going to judge yourself just by the number of nodes. If you need a node, just create it. If you do not need a node, do not create it. It is as simple as that. Thank you everybody for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.